Hey everyone, we are going to get started in just a second. I'm going to let everyone join from the waiting room, and we are excited to have Portia James back on for another webinar with Rethink, this time with our startup community. Couple of housekeeping things as we are having people join us. This is a webinar that is being recorded. So if at any point you need to hop off, join again, if you have any audio issues, things like that, you will receive the recording afterward via email, so you can catch yourself back up on anything that you might miss. We do ask that you are asking questions through the Q&A option. So if you do have questions, you can type them there. We are going to have more of a conversation this time for our startup community webinar. A lot of times we are presenting information for you related to different areas and aspects of building a business. But we are fortunate today to have Portia talk to us a little bit about her experience as a BCBA entrepreneur and business owner. So it's going to be a little bit more conversational than usual. If you do have questions, though, again, type them into the Q&A, and we will try to answer any questions that we get with any time that we have remaining. I will do my best to also monitor the chat if you guys have any questions as we're going through, if it relates more so to any issues that you're having. But just know that you will be muted the whole time. So if you do have questions, utilize it through chatting and Q&A. Okay, we're going to get started. Portia, thanks so much for joining us again. For anyone that missed it, Portia was on our webinar series called Our Next Guest with Bridget Taylor a couple months ago. We talked a little bit more about radical values then, and when your personal values misalign with professional values. Today, we're going to do a little bit different conversation. You guys are part of the startup community, so you are all either interested in or have recently started your own business. And we thought we would bring in an expert because she's done that not once, but multiple times. And has even written a book. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end too. Lots of books, actually. But I am getting ahead of myself. I want to first welcome you, Portia. Portia is owner of Behavior Genius and Genius Operations. She is a BCBA. I'm going to let her tell a little bit more about her background, though. So Portia, can you start by letting us know how you got started in the field, and then kind of at what point you wanted to start your own practice?
Yeah. First, thank you for having me back. I had so much fun last time, and I can't wait to get into this topic. I have been in the field of behavior analysis for 17 years. I started as a behavior technician and worked my way up. In California, we have a mid-tier master's level supervisor. So I worked myself up to that, became a BCBA, and then I was a BCBA for several years, maybe 5 or 6 years. I was operating in the field as a behavior analyst before I got into kind of the operations side. I went into a clinical director role, and from there, I really got interested in organizational behavior management. I had 2 kids in that time, and on both maternity leaves, I obtained certifications in organizational behavior management because I was sitting on the couch with a baby, and I guess I had nothing else to do. I'm a maniac.
Not busy at all.
Sure. I was being crazy, and I just got really interested in understanding how businesses run, how they operate, and really, it wasn't because I ever wanted to own an ABA company. It was because I just wanted to be more effective at my job, and I wanted to understand the industry all the way around, because I felt like that would help me to be a better behavior analyst and better connect and engage my clients if I understood the perspective of the leadership team. And so I did that. And then once I became clinical director, it was on and popping from there. I realized that I had the power to make connections and partnerships with some of the insurance companies that I was working with. I was able to, really leverage the relationships that I had built in the field, just from being in the field, to help grow my region. So I was working in the Inland Empire region, Southern California, and our headquarters was based in Orange County, but there were 16 different regions across the United States, and my region was one of them. So I grew that region really unexpectedly for me, and I think also for my boss. From 32, they had been open for about 2 years. They had 32 clients, and I was able to scale that region to 150 in my first year and a half in that role as clinical director. And so it became really fun for me. We had like metrics and targets that we had to hit, that when we would hit, we would celebrate in my office, and we'd buy donuts. And I just had such a good time scaling that region. That landed me a position at headquarters as director of clinical operations, where my job was to take the other 15 regions and do the same thing. So to look at their operations and understand the different variables that they go through in terms of their demographic. Every state is totally different in terms of, litigation and, insurances and how they operate. So I had to really study that and learn how to provide, understand enough about each individual region, but then turn that into organizational data that my boss loved and that he could understand. So that's kind of that's just how I progressed. I didn't anticipate starting an ABA company ever. I just felt like it was too many moving pieces, and I didn't know if I wanted the responsibility. But I was, in full transparency, I was working in that role for a few years. I made a complaint about a pretty significant pay disparity, very significant pay disparity between myself and a white man who was in a lateral position to mine. And I was locked out of my email. By the time I got to my car that day, I lost my job. And so I'm not good at anything else. Right? I was like, I only know how to do ABA. I've been doing it since I was 20 years old, and I don't know that I look to be only 25, but I'm 38, so that's a lot of skin in the game. And but I was also scared to go back to work and work for someone, and someone else have the power to determine, my future. And so I cried for about 3 months, and then I was like, okay, girl, get up, wash your face. I think that book came out during that time, Girl, Wash Your Face. And I said, okay, I'm just going to see if I can start a small social skills group, something that can get me back, in, and I can maybe do it myself. And so I partnered with IHP, which is one of the largest healthcare companies in Southern California. I was able to get a contract, little old me. I was like, they gave me a contract. And from there, it was on and popping. I accepted their referrals. They asked me, if you do the ABA, you do all the codes, right? So you can't just do social skills. So I said, okay, well, I'm willing. Also, I was broke, so I was like, I'm willing to do whatever. And at that point, and we just, Behavior Genius grew into something that I could have never ever imagined. But truly, my decision to start a company was out of fear of going back to work.
Well, it's unfortunate it was out of fear. I do have to disagree with you when you say ABA is the only thing you know how to do well, because on a personal level, I think there's a lot more that you do well. You're amazing. And so you started this social skills group, and that eventually grew into what Behavior Genius is now. Can you tell us a little bit about that company and the services that you provide?
Absolutely. So I started off actually doing consultant work while I was still working. I was consulting in adult residential homes. I had a friend who started a business, and she asked for my help. And so we carried that program for our first 2.5 years. And last year, we made the difficult decision to kind of focus on the services that we were, that we really wanted to provide well. And so we did start with that social skills program, and our social skills program we are still running. It's called Social IQ, ICUE, like social Q. And that was my baby, though. I ran that social skills program for about 1.5 years. I went on all the field trips with the kids, and we really provide a naturalistic opportunity for kids to come and connect. So we have instruction time, but we also make time for laser tag. We make time for a community outing every month. We make time for birthday parties. Those are all social opportunities. And so really just, I love it so much. I think it's my favorite thing about Behavior Genius and our services is because I was able to take the way that I taught socialization when I was a clinician and turn that into an entire program. So we provide social skills still. in both of our treatment centers in Southern California. And then we also provide in-home and center-based ABA services. And in two office locations. They're about 40 minutes apart. So we're in Ontario, and then we're in the high desert for our second office.
You were able to grow and scale during the COVID period, which I think was a struggle for a lot of people. So how did you manage to do that? And what was that experience like?
Oh, I have chills. I did it afraid. I've done most of this afraid. I think that'll be a common theme. And I hope that that's inspiring to people who are afraid, is just to do it afraid. I had a mentor of mine at the time that was like, do it and do it afraid. And I never, ever let that go. Everything I do it afraid. I don't do it because I'm like a badass or I'm invincible. I do it afraid. I think that, gosh, the pandemic was hard for everyone. And so there was a lot to navigate and unpack. One thing that I am really good at besides ABA is being able to find an opportunity, no matter the circumstance. And so for us, of course, it was Friday the 13th. I'll never forget. We were supposed to get our keys on the 16th of March. And on the 13th, I went to pick my kids up from school and got a text message while I was in the parking lot that was like, the school is shutting down. Like, basically, don't bring your kids back. So you're on your own. And so I was mortified because I was like, I'm getting my keys. I'm about to start this like adventure, and I have to have my kids at my desk. How am I going to do this? And so my sister, actually, we started talking. She's grew up more on the East Coast, and I grew up in California. And so we didn't really have as much time to connect as we wanted to, but she came to visit because the ticket was like $40 from Georgia, where she lived. And we stayed up all night and we talked about Behavior Genius. And I knew that I couldn't do it without some type of support, not only in the business, but also with my kids and things like that. And so she actually moved her family. She went back, and her husband and her 3 kids moved back to within 3 weeks. They were living
Wow.
in a house in Southern California. So that was kind of the beginning, was like having someone be like, okay, we can make the most of this pandemic. And then we just kind of it was very touch and go. We didn't know if we were going to be considered essential or not. We just kind of kept going through it. So we made the switch to telehealth, which was hard for social skills. At the time, we were still very like heavy with social skills. So it was tough getting kids to connect on video, but they were showing up because parents were like, look, we don't have anything else to do. So we had great like attendance. They showed up, and we just worked through it, and it was murky and it was weird. And being in the field for so long, I personally just didn't like it. I didn't feel that it was super effective, but we maintained connections. And I think that's what people needed more than anything at that time, was to be connected to something. We opened our treatment center 3 months later. So 6 months later, in August, we opened our first treatment center, and everyone was like, people were losing their offices. Like, how did you get the courage to just go get an office space, right? We didn't have money. Okay, I want to reiterate, we didn't have money. But we did it because we were told in August, I was informed that our kids weren't going back to school. And so I was like, okay, I'm about ready to pull my hair out. But I've had the blessing and the privilege of being able to keep my kids with me while I worked all summer. Some of these parents had to walk away from their jobs, or they've lost their jobs. And so I was like, I'm sure they will probably kick in the door if we give them somewhere to bring their kids, where they feel that their kids have lost everything. They've lost the opportunity to learn in a natural setting. They have no peers, right? And parents, even me, we don't know what we're doing. I couldn't be expected to teach my kids. And so, times that by 100 for a parent who has a child with a significant, need. And I just think everyone was looking for a way to make sure that their kids could get some type of service while everything was shutting down. So we opened a treatment center for one specific little boy who, that was his story. They couldn't have services in the home, and the mom really just desperately needed a break, but she also needed the help. And we were like, okay, let's do it for this one. And we did it for one, and we outgrew that space. And every quarter that year, for our first year in business, we outgrew our space. And so we ended up acquiring 4 offices on the same floor, and they let us knock out all of the walls and turn it into whatever we wanted. So I literally drew the blueprint for Behavior Genius Ontario. But that's, I mean, we just got through it and we didn't know. We did we had masks, we did everything we were supposed to do. We tried our best to follow all the rules. It was hard though. It was hard and it was really scary being a new business because we didn't have the infrastructure to sustain if any little thing happened. We could have lost our business.
Wow. Definitely overcoming some fears in that case, and just getting things thrown at you and making the best of it.
Yeah.
You're very passionate, and I know that the mission and values of Behavior Genius reflect that. Can you talk a little bit about what those mission and value statements are?
Yes. Our mission is to close the gap in access to behavioral health care for people who have been historically marginalized or underserved. And so we live in San Bernardino County, and that's where I grew up, and it's where my clinic is. And those are the people that we serve. And so when we first opened, I was like, oh, we'll have this mission for like autism, like every other company, right? But I learned as we grew, it wasn't until like 2.5, almost 3 years in that I was like, my mission though, is specifically for the people that we are serving. My mission is to make sure that they can have access to quality care. There is a major equity and access problem, not only in this industry, but in the country. And so for me, I was like, well, I have the power to really make a difference for these kids, because these little Black kids, these little Spanish speaking kids, they grow up and they become Black and brown men, most of them being men. And then they fill our prisons. That's the truth. And a lot of them have behavioral issues and that are unaddressed. And so for me, having family members who fall within that category too, I just really had to get with myself on what was going to be the best, what value I could bring to the industry at the level that I'm at the CEO level. And I realized I had the power to make a difference in a totally different way. And so, yeah, I'm really, really passionate about making sure that our kids have, and the parents have access to the education that they need and the tools that they need to be able to be successful. They're already overcoming one big thing, right? Racism. So we're already having to overcome that. And then they're overcoming autism, and then they're overcoming, maybe language issue. And so it's just, if we could help them to overcome, anything that will be barriers for them in their future, then they can work on the overcoming of the other things, the bigger things, right? So yeah, that's our mission. So we changed our mission and our vision statement to be a reflection of that last year.
I know diversity and cultural awareness is really important to you, and you have a DIVE initiative. Can you talk to us about what that is?
Yeah. So the DIVE initiative it stands for Diversity, Inclusion, Visibility, and Equity. And really, I don't want to call it an initiative, but I like how it sounds. It comes out. Initiatives, I feel, kind of come and go. And that's the thing that I don't love about diversity or DEI initiatives. So I don't know if you've gotten to that part in my book yet, Erin, but I do talk about how I feel about these, like I use the term fake ass, DEI initiatives. And the reason I say that is because what I think, and this is going to maybe be an unpopular opinion, but I hope that it rattles people to think more about their DEI initiatives. What I believe is that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, was something that should have always existed. And maybe in some ways it did always exist. But then when George Floyd was murdered, people made businesses and livings out of DEI and said, and I think for good reasons, right? I don't think everybody capitalized, but I think there were some good reasons that people were like, okay, we need to educate our team. But DEI isn't really about education. DEI is an intervention for companies that struggle with diversity, that have diversity problems, right? Because if you just have a diverse company where there are diverse people in leadership. And by diverse, I don't just mean people of color, but where there's also people with disabilities that are employed there, that are given the same opportunities as the people without disabilities, where there's real actual equity, pay equity, opportunity equity, where there is, I mean, I've been in San Bernardino County where 85% of the people in the county are minorities. But then I've always only been the only Black person in leadership in my companies. And so we could do a training about diversity, but if the practices within the company are not diverse and are not intentionally, not just unintentionally diverse, but like making the intended effort to say, okay, are our hiring practices diverse? Every new training that we put in place, can everyone access it? Is it accessible to everyone, right? I think that that is where we're falling short as an industry. And it's not the ABA industry, just as a workforce. That's where we're falling short, is actually celebrating diversity instead of talking about diversity. And so that's my issue. And so when I wrote the Dive Initiative, it was out of probably, I guess, I was annoyed because I received an email on Black History Month, February 1st. In came all the emails. And so I wrote this blog and I was like, here's the reason why you won't be getting a Black History Month email from me. And it was just because it was like, celebrate every year diversity, right? Like, let's talk about how much you appreciate me as a customer every day of the year. Want to ask me for an interview or to join your webinar any month of the year, otherwise it feels disingenuous. I feel like diversity is not something that you teach. It's not something that you train. It's something that you do, that you consciously do in action every day. So in our Dive Initiative, the point is we have a calendar and anyone can access this calendar. If you go to Behavior Genius Linktree, the calendar is in there. You can use it for your businesses. I would encourage you to find it and use it as a blueprint. It's free, like it's ours, it's what we use. But essentially we it's to hold us accountable to taking photos and making sure that what we're demonstrating in everyday action, the way that we're teaching, our kids in our treatment center reflects diversity all year long. The way that we are hiring staff and engaging with them is inclusive all year long. And so we have let's make sure that we're always talking about it, right? And let's do blogs, let's have roundtable discussions about diversity and how we can be a more diverse, because just because I'm Black, the responsibility or the expectation is that I would be really good at DEI. But it's not true. Number one, I'm not an expert in diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm an expert just in my own experience, not just in being Black, but in my own experience, right? So I don't know how to design an initiative, but I do know that we can be really intentional at looking at the ways in which even I have indoctrinated my team with racist or minority thinking, just because of the way that I have come up in the industry, what I've experienced. I'm like, oh, this is just how we always do things. And we're like, shoot, that's not very diverse. That's not inclusive. That's not mindful of the person who might need a little more support, right? Our team member. So it's a way to just hold people accountable. It's an accountability measure. And so there are just a couple of things that we do throughout the month to make sure that every member of the team is accountable to equitable services to our clients, but also an equitable experience for the people who work for us. And really the goal is to build a workspace that people don't have to recover from. And that's really what diversity, equity, inclusion means to me.
More than just checking a box and saying you've done training, and actually living it every day.
Yeah. So it's just a living it every day type of thing. It's not difficult. It's fun stuff, but it's an inclusive, collective community of diverse people, and making sure that we celebrate that. And that's really, I think, missing, because we're thinking about autism. We're thinking about our clients. We're thinking about billable hours. We're not thinking about community. We're not thinking about diversity all the time. So there should be something in place that helps us to do that. And then it goes from there, it goes into our policies and our processes, and making sure that we have specific policies around diversity. And so that's something that we've worked really hard on this year specifically.
Just really making it part of the foundation of everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
in the company. Do you think that there's anything in the field of ABA that we're doing right as it comes to DEI? I know there's lots of webinars and talks
Yeah.
and things like that, but there's probably some things we can continue improving. What are we doing right?
Sure.
And what do you think we can do to improve?
As an industry, I think what I've noticed in the last few years is we're having the conversation. Um, their race was really taboo to discuss during work time. It was like religion, right? Like, just don't bring up race, you know? And so I think companies are open to the conversation. They have DEI specialists who work in their, in their companies, and we're open. The conferences that I've been to, there have been numerous conversations about diversity. Some of them have been really bold. And I've had conversations with some presenters who were like, I don't even think my presentation was going to get selected because it was like, it's way out there, right? It's very uncomfortable to talk about race in America because race has been like the it's been the thing. It's been like the elephant in every room forever, And so it's really a taboo thing to even talk about. And I think in ABA, we've had some really cool research around race. I was having a conversation with someone recently about just presentations around policing and around not just like diversity at work, but like working with our clients and making sure that they have everything that they and understanding different demographics. So like I worked in Inland Empire and lived there my entire life, and then I worked in Orange County, and it was like a totally different world. The needs of the people were different. And so I think just being open to continue having conversations like this one. And for me, it's really an act of courage for me to talk about race because I feel like, it hasn't been welcomed in the past and nobody really wants to hear about it. But when I launched my book, I realized that there were more people of all backgrounds that were like, we do want to hear about it. And we want to hear about it in this raw way that you talk about it. And so I'm practicing getting better at just like putting it out there on the table. Like, this is the girl that talks about diversity. This is the girl that talks about equity. That way, when they call me to the meeting, they know what they're getting. And I've gotten lots of calls to many meetings. And so specifically in ABA. And so one thing I can say is that we are doing a good job of saying this science has been this way for so long, but we're willing to go in another direction for the empowerment of all people. And I think that is beautiful, being able to adjust as behavior analysts to what we know and learning something new and being able to incorporate that into what our practice is going to literally change the world, because we're changing these kids and we're helping to shape who they will be.
And you're part of that changing the world. You are really dedicated to helping minority business owners succeed. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So once Behavior Genius grew and scaled as quickly as it did, we're concentrated within, I would say, like a 30-mile radius in Inland Empire all the way around. And we have 200 clients all in that area and 185 employees. And so doing that and during a pandemic, you can imagine like how difficult it was. And I was building a plane while I was flying. I didn't have everything like in order first. I just kind of like went in there and was like, I guess we're doing it. But I think that, what I realized was that other people didn't have the resources either, especially minorities, And so what was happening, what I noticed was the trend that people were leaving their jobs during the pandemic. 90% of new companies were owned by Black women, small businesses. And people were leaving this industry wanting to have something else, or saying, I can't even continue here with this type of treatment, or not being seen, right? Or not being heard, not having a voice. And so people were starting to want to step out. And I had a conversation with someone at BHCOE who actually, this isn't her data or her opinion, but she shared with me that someone had shared with her that it's easier to open an ABA company than it is to open a nail shop, because there's just no regulations. And I was like, okay, big props to BHCOE, right? Who's like defining what the standard is. But these people, they want to get out and they just don't know how. They
Mhm.
don't know if they can do it and they don't have the resources. And all of my years in the field, I didn't have someone that I could ask, hey, how do you do this? Right. There was literally no one. There's so much gatekeeping that happens in ABA where people just want to like hoard all the information as if they can service all the clients, that they just don't want to share. They don't want anybody else. They don't want to let anybody else be great. And
Mhm.
so my mission is for minorities to have someone that they can ask. So my sister and I said, okay, we did all this stuff. We built in these, these systems that we needed in order to scale our business. And some of them we built after the fact. We're like, oh, it's a shit show, right? And then we had to go create them based on things that we like messed up big time. But we learned, and everybody else doesn't have to learn by their bootstraps like we did. And so at Genius Operations is, as far as I know, the first and only operations company that is specifically dedicated to and curated for the advancement of Black behavior analysts. So if you want to start a business and you just have no idea where to start, we want to be the ones that like, oh, I do have someone that I can ask. So that's the mission.
When you are working with people who are trying to develop a business and start their own practice, what do you tell those who are maybe struggling to overcome barriers that they are facing as a minority?
Yeah, keep going, unconditionally keep going. I think the only thing that really separates me from other people is I will take the risk, and I will keep going. I might cry every day, or I might want to give up or think about giving up, but it's keep going, stay focused. There are so many things that can distract us, and racism is one of them. It's a huge distraction. There's a quote by Maya Angelou. She talks about racism as a distraction. It distracts us from the mission, from what that's what it's for, is to distract us, and to have us thinking about racism and thinking about what's hard and whether or not we're going to be able to overcome something, instead of thinking about like the metrics and the next step and the opportunity, and how we have the competitive advantages that we have. So I think, I teach a class on organizational behavior management, and during that class, we do a SWOT analysis, and I encourage the people to add as a end threat racism, if that's their journey, to add that. And then after we're finished, we sit and we're like, okay, now they don't know that I'm going to do this, but every single thing that you wrote that was a threat, you need to write how you're going to overcome that. What is it that you're going to do to minimize your reaction or the impact of that threat on your business? That's how you plan for the next step. And then it's just one step at a time. It's not easy. I don't have like a magic potion for how you overcome systemic barriers, but the most important thing is to keep going and to get people in your corner who want for you what you want for yourself. And they don't just have to be other minorities, because in all honesty, you're probably not going to find them. This industry it's 3%, 4% Black. So you're probably not going to find them, but find people like you, Erin, who are who were willing to encourage me, Bridget, who are like, we want that too, because we're all impacted by this type of, these barriers. And so I think that's the most important thing, is to meet people who want the same for you and for themselves that you want. And then let those people encourage you to keep going, and to know that your work matters, I think is important.
You have the support. You just need to ask sometimes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What other advice do you have for clinicians who are starting their own business? Anything that you are kind of like maybe go-tos that you are working on?
My first one is have goals. Write your metrics. I meet a lot of business owners that don't have metrics. And you guys know we're behavior analysts, so it sounds really big and scary to think about having KPIs, right? Key performance indicator. What should they be? Where should I start? If you want to know where you should start, ask me. Find me on social media, not on LinkedIn. I'm really bad on LinkedIn. It will take days, but if you find me on Instagram and just, hey, I just want to know, like, what are your ideas about KPIs? I could give you like your first top 3 things you should be thinking about. Utilization, obviously, being one of them. You should have a hiring metric to help with your utilization. That's the most important thing, is to have a measurement. When we first started, I was like, okay, for no reason, then I'm a maniac. I want to see if we could get 100, looking at how we're getting referrals every month. I just want to see if we can get 100. 100 is like my number, because I also tried to sell 100 books in 30 days, right? So I'm like, let me just see if we can just get 100 in a year. That was my goal. Let me see if I can get 100, because that's what I did at my last company. Now, they were established and everybody knew them. They don't know who we are, but let me just see if I can do that. And as soon as I set that goal, I broke it down and was like, okay, we need about 8 referrals a month. Where are those referrals going to come from? So I had to think about partnerships with insurance companies, getting funded with other, or getting contracted with commercial insurance companies and not just IHP. I had to think about client retention, so I want to get 100. I want to keep those 100, right? So by the end of the year, I want to have 100. So I put in place a metric for client retention. Behavior Genius has a 96% client retention rate, and so one thing sort of led to another, but I had a goal. And it was arbitrary at the time. It could have been 50 and I would have run a beautiful company, and we didn't go looking for those referrals. We actually at times were like, oh, our average that year was 11 per month. And so what I'll say is, one thing that's important is always to know where you're going. And then when you know exactly where you're going, 2 things are going to happen. You're going to be able to put things in place that are going to help you to get there, instead of just kind of like doing, because in ABA, we just get into the doing part. But you're going to be able to put specific things in place to help you get there. And when you get there, you have something to celebrate. If you just are going with the flow, you never know, like, when am I going to feel like what I've done is magnificent for me, and for me, 100 is a magnificent number, 50 was magnificent, 25 was magnificent, and so you can celebrate your milestones, but we have to set them. And I think as business owners, the ones I've met, at least, the first thing I set down to do was metrics. I was like, all right, what are we measuring? What are our goals? What's our plans for the year? And they were a little messier than they are now. Now they're really nice. But you're planning. It's Q4. We're going into Q4, and I've been talking to my team about Q4. It's my favorite quarter of the year because I get to plan, I get to create. I'm a creative. I'm more of an artist than a scientist. And so I get to go, I'm a visionary. I get to see what the year is going to be like for 2024. So I get crazy. I think I probably stress my team out. But I get really excited about what we need to close out for this year and get into next year. And every business person that you speak to who's successful, guarantee they know what Q4 is about. They know what every quarter is about. Q4 is like go time. And it's because we're looking at what things we want to measure next year and what things we want to accomplish. And we're going to use those measurements to know whether or not we've accomplished it. That's the number one first thing you should do, is what do you want? Not just what is your mission and who do you serve, but like, what impact do you want to make? I want to impact 100 families. And perfect. And how much time? And then what are you going to do to get there? And if you set goals and targets for every single thing, then you can start working in a plan. No one should work without a plan.
One thing you can do is we've been talking about the book throughout, so give us a little teaser about what the book's about.
A teaser. It is about organizational behavior management, but not in a performance management wonderful book type of way, not in a scientific textbooky type of way. I think I tried to break down business as best as I could for the average regular person like myself. And so, yeah, it's about values, determining your mission, making organization-based decisions, making ethical decisions, performance management, systems, processes, policies, all of that is in there, but it tells it in a way of that I think is relatable, because I do share some nuggets about my story and my experience and how I did it, and examples of some of the things that I encountered during and how those maybe were difficult for me and how I navigated them. I think it's important to not just to write the book, but to talk about why I feel inclined to write the book, and also why I felt qualified to write the book. So I do talk about it. It's as personable as it can be. It's a little racy like me. It's a little edgy. But I think that it will help any person to just feel a little more comfortable in their humanity while trying to navigate this big business world. It's totally different, but a regular person can do it. I think that's what's important. Any person who understands the principles and is willing to do the work can do it. And so that's what I hope to make clear.
We were talking a little bit before we started the webinar, and I'm halfway through the book, but I have to agree that was one of the things that we were talking about, is it's very relatable. It's almost as if you're just talking to the reader a lot of times, and it seems very conversational, like you're just sitting down with a glass of red wine with a friend.
Perfect.
And it doesn't come off as textbooky. I was saying I was on the train traveling yesterday and didn't realize I was halfway through the book in one day. So I encourage you all, there's a link in the chat if you want to learn more and read the book. You can purchase it there, because I think Jenny was asking earlier that she's interested in learning more about OBM. Jenny, that's one way you can do it. And then I guess we can just, if you're okay with it, Portia, jump into some of these questions, because the second part of what Jenny was asking is, do you have any recommendations on certifications or courses that someone could do to learn more about OBM?
Yeah, I have a course that matches my book. It's called Radical OBM. It is quarterly. I teach it quarterly, and it's project based. And so I ask you to walk yourself through an actual project, either within your organization that you work for, or the one that you've built. And we use every single chapter. It's literally chapter 1 through 9. Chapter 10 is like a finale chapter. It's a memoir. It's more about my story, my personal story. But we walk through chapters 1 through 9. And so we start with the foundations of OBM, and then we talk about real life application of organizational behavior management in your small business. And so our next one is January. That we're actually 2 weeks from the end of our first cohort that started in August. And so you can go to radicalobm.com and you can get all the information that you need there to register.
Perfect. I'm going to type that into the chat as well for anyone who may need to access it. It's radicalobm.com.
Yep.
A couple other things, the questions that have come in, and again, for those of you listening, if you do have additional questions for Portia, go ahead and type them into the Q&A. Portia, if you want to share your contact information in the chat, go ahead. I know a lot of people have asked about that. You guys will receive an email following this. I think there were some questions about accessing a recording, so we will have a link to the recording there. And we'll put a lot of the information on just how to access the book and how to access the course in that email as well.
Perfect. I did drop my Instagram links there. It's very informal, but I'm a very informal person. When I'm on social media, even LinkedIn, I'm not working. Okay. So that's the best way to reach me with your question. So my personal, and then I added Genius Operations as well. That if you needed help with your business, that's the one that you would go to. And if you're interested in understanding more about Behavior Genius and just getting a viewpoint of the Behavior Genius community, then I dropped that one in there as well.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll give it another minute or so for people to ask questions. The only ones that are coming in right now is, how do I get more, Portia? How do I access you here and here? So again, the emojis have been going off like they have for our next guest webinar. So I know that people are very excited to have you back. Robin, I see your question about not having the contact information. It's actually in the chat. So there's a Q&A and there's a chat. Portia's contact information is in the chat part. Actually, Portia, it says that it is just to the host and panelists. So that may be why people aren't getting it. If you go to the to part and put everyone,
Okay.
and just do that one more time for me, or I can do that.
Yeah, no problem. So you're seeing it, but not everyone. Let me go to
Right
everyone.
now, yeah.
There you go.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Um, we also had a question come in. Nick wants to know, what's the most surprising thing you've learned since starting your OBM course?
The most surprising thing I've learned is, great question. Probably the number of, so I have a questionnaire and assessment that if you drop me, if you just say like, hi, send me the assessment on like any of my socials, I will send it to you. I'm working on getting it digitized, but right now it's just a PDF. But I have all of my students fill out this assessment and they have to do a scale of 1 to 10 on like whether or not they have certain systems and like operating, processes and things in place. And our average right now is like 18 out of a score of 50. So I was really amazed because, I don't necessarily feel like it's so interesting, Erin, you're like, we have an expert. And I'm like, I don't know that I'm an expert, right? Because I feel so I'm still building my empire, right? But to know that these people, some of them work for big companies, major companies, and they're like, no, my company doesn't have that. My company doesn't have. I'm like, how did you get to be that size and not have anything? Well, everything is just haywire, right? It feels crazy. And that's the reason why they're taking this course. And so I think the level of documentation or lack thereof for like systems and processes that are like consistent is really, really low. And I was really surprised at how little people really had in place.
If you need an expert, she's right here.
I'm gonna step into that.
All right. We'll give it another minute for questions to come in. And while they're doing that, just a quick reminder, if you are not already part of our Facebook user group, we do have a Facebook user group for the startup community. That's a great way to connect to other BCBA entrepreneurs and access lots of other resources that we have, including webinars like these. So that link is now in the chat. And if you want more information about the startup community, I am going to put that link in the chat as well. If you found this somehow without first being a member, that's okay. It's not too late. So that link is the second one there in the chat. I don't see any other questions coming in, Portia. So thank you again for your time. It's always exciting to speak to you, speak with you. Are you going to be at any of the upcoming conferences in the fall that maybe people can connect there?
I am not. Someone just asked. I'm not. GS Operations is hosting a behavior analyst retreat in Dominican Republic in October.
All that.
So that is our big, and then my little sister's getting married in November. And so we just have so many other like family things to do, and we have some travel. So someone just asked me that. I won't, but next year I will. I do plan on attending several. So I usually like to tell people where I'm going to be in case they want to say hi.
Well, you know where to find her until then, and I hope you have a great retreat. Tell your sister congratulations.
I
will. And if you haven't gotten the book yet, I encourage you to do it. Thanks so much, Portia. Always great to see you. Have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good week.
Bye.